This Webquest is designed for 11th grade U.S. history. So this Webquest is about learning about different eras within the United States. It would best be used as a cumulative project, like a final. So students will be working in groups of 3, and they'll be assigned a decade or era that they've already covered in class. So each group will be going more in depth on their era and then presenting it to their classmates and teaching them. So the students each have a different role. You have the politician, the economist, and the sociologist. The politician is responsible for all government and political type issues of that era. The economist for changes in the economy and the different factors, so like wars and things like that. And the sociologist is about the cultural history and all of those type of changes. So each student is required to follow the state standards and use them as guidelines to research for their area, and then they are to teach their own group about what they learned in their section, so then their group can make a well-rounded presentation and teach the class about their entire era. So the first group would be the 19th century, the turn of the century, so this would be more than necessarily a decade. And the questions that are in each section are structured from state standards, and the students do have hints that the state standards may hold more examples in the questions, and these type of questions are used to guide them in what they should be researching. So, for example, in this 1900s one, like The Economist, it's talking about Latin America, and so it specifically brings up like the Panama Canal, so like how the Panama Canal, influenced the economy because of all the money that was being sent to Latin America. So the different sections that we have are the 1900s, the 1920s, the Great Depression, which is mostly the 1930s, World War II with the 1940s, the 1950s, which I named Populux, and then the 1960s are split into 2 separate eras. So you have the Kennedy administration, and then you have the Johnson administration, and then we're ending it with the Nixon administration. The reason I chose not to go into Carter or Reagan or Ford or any of the later after Nixon eras is due to going off of the standards, which are right here. The standards are split by decade until you get to the Cold War. From the 1950s through the 1990s, the standards are very mixed, and they're a lot more broad to hit every single decade. And since we do not have specific decade or standards for those decades, it's a lot easier to go by era. So the students should mainly be focusing on just through the end of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal with Nixon. The rubric is posted for their presentation, so they know exactly what is expected of them. And then they have a conclusion saying that this is the whole point of this project is so that the students can understand the main themes of history, and they can see the change in history and how history is really just built upon itself. Without the 1920s, you couldn't have had the 1950s, and without the 1940s, you couldn't have had the 1950s, and that's really important for the students to see.